Hello, everyone. We're welcome to this session of Dragonfly Insights. We're excited to have you on with us. And I'm running technical today because Nicole is actually on vacation, lucky her. So hopefully we won't have any technical challenges because I usually don't do all this myself. So anyhow, today I'm excited to welcome Erica Penley Claycomb to our call. I like to call her Erica Penley because I've known her that way for so many years, but she celebrated her first anniversary on Monday. It was the 13th. It was one of the best weddings I've ever been to in my life. Phenomenal. And so she's getting ready to come on video here, Erica. If you could turn your video on, that would be great. We can see you then. And so, hi, welcome. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Very good, thanks. So as you know, we like to start out with a question, the same question for everyone basically, and that is, how are you? How is your family? How have you been through COVID? You know, what's been going on in Nashville, and how have you been coping with all of this?
Yeah, so far so good. I mean, my husband and I haven't been sick. My parents haven't gotten sick, but my niece did just test positive yesterday. So,
oh no,
so she's sick. Yeah. So, but I mean, otherwise, I mean, I think that, I definitely have my days where I feel defeated. It's just, you kind of try to make plans. You mentioned we just had our first year wedding anniversary, and we might have normally gone out to a nice dinner, but it was just something not romantic about wearing a mask. And I think one of the things I miss the most is seeing my parents. They live just 30 minutes down the road, and I can't see them, and I hate that.
Yeah, that is hard. I did see that you did go out on your boat and you got some great sunset pictures. So
Yep. So that's, fortunately, we live just a couple blocks from a lake, and we've got a boat down there, and so we get to go out and do that, and it gives us a nice break from just sitting around the house all the time. And thankfully we have that. If we didn't have that, I don't know what I would be doing. Going crazy, I guess.
Yeah. When I lived in New York, it was certainly tough, to be in that closed-in environment and on top of each other. Thankfully now I can walk to a lake and see the mountains and all of that in Colorado. So definitely great to be able to take in some fresh air and have a break from the crazy. Yeah. So, well, Erica, you have been in distribution. We have known each other since 1999. When I went to work for Kimpton, I sat by you and I loaded rates in Apollo Galileo because it's the only system I knew well enough to load rates, and you loaded them in everything else for Kimpton. And we had that's when you had to load rates manually. And we had stacks and stacks and stacks of rate submissions from Christine Lawson and her sales team. And we got to know each other really well doing late nights, loading rates in the GDS. And then you went to work for Kimpton in New Orleans shortly thereafter, and then came to work as part of my team at corporate to lead distribution. And you're one of those people who, I feel like distribution is a bit of a lost art in our industry right now, that there aren't as many people who know it inside and out anymore. And part of that's because it's changed so much, right? So much is integrated with the CRS now, so you don't have to load as much independently in the GDS, and it's also complex with OTA connections and wholesale connections and all these things that, back then we didn't really deal with that, right? But we did deal with the complexity of the GDS. And I think, we learned so many things by things not working and troubleshooting. And one of your top skills is you're like a dog with a bone when you can't figure something out. So, guilty. Yes, I know you are. But we've never been through what we've been through now, right? You and I worked together in 2001 at Kimpton, and it was hard. And it was a hard recovery. And, we had to just make sure that everything was dialed in order to get our business back after that. And, had to be able to kind of shift quickly to what was needed at that time, and to really focus on what we needed to do to drive additional distribution channels in order to get some business through the door. So, as it relates to this downturn, which is worse than, of course, anything we've ever seen, what are the most important things that you believe for hotels to do in distribution channels right now in order to prepare for recovery?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that people can be doing. I mean, checking out your cancellation policy is one. I know a lot of people where markets might have been a 48 or 72 hour policy, moving that to a 24 hours, but making sure that when you do make that change, that you're updating it everywhere on your booking engine, at your call center, on your OTAs, and you can't forget about your wholesalers as well. So making sure that those are consistent across everything. One other really big thing, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it later, is extending rates. And, if it's not already a part of your practices of extending them through the first quarter of the following year, get in that habit, first of all, but also getting them loaded through 2021, auditing your content, whether that's textual and your images. Take this lower time that you have and make sure that you're represented well. Deactivate old rates while you're auditing your systems, taking a look at that. And another thing too is checking out your add-ons or enhancements that you might have on your booking engine. Usually the distribution team is responsible for those, and people may not want to be adding on that spa treatment or a dining credit, but they might want some exercise equipment, for instance, delivered to the room, or parking discounted. So just making sure that it's still applicable for today's market with the change in travel that we're experiencing.
So with that said, there are things now that are more prevalent or more important to the consumer than they used to be. Like, we never talked about cleanliness or sanitization, or, it happened, right? And hopefully. And at most boutique and independent hotels, they pay such attention to detail that it was super important to them to make sure that happens flawlessly every time, right? But now that it's got a heightened sense of importance to our guests, where do you suggest that content goes right now? I'm sure systems are going to somewhat change to have a section for that, but most of them don't. So, where should that be on somebody's website, with the call center, on the OTA, or the OTAs allowing you to put it on there? Like, how's that all working now?
Yeah. So definitely for the GDSs, we'll start there, is putting it in room descriptions. And you are limited on your space with that. So, but you can squeeze in a little bit of information to get the point across that you're taking extra care with it. And then to further clarify on it in the hotel descriptions, add a little bit more color that guests may be looking for. Some of the GDSs are starting to come out with some qualifiers for the systems for the cleanliness or different attributes that are related to that. But the OTAs are also loading new areas for you to fill out, and you may not be aware of it if your market manager hasn't communicated that to you, or you maybe have stumbled across it in the extranet. But I encourage you to log into the extranet and find those areas. It is something that you're probably going to need a housekeeping person to help you answer, because you probably don't know all the details of what's going on with housekeeping, but knowing it's happening, obviously. But you're going to want to definitely make sure that you're getting that information out there, and obviously on your website having an area about that. You see a lot of the brands with the chains with their clean promises, or whatever they're calling it, to get that information out there. But yeah, it is definitely important, and making sure you've got it in room descriptions is the best way to communicate it.
Yeah, and we've done some research recently in conjunction with BLA just on how boutique and independent hotels are managing it. And we've seen some really good examples of companies that are, walking the guest through that process from arrival to departure. Viceroy has great examples on their site. Rosewood does. There are some, I think, really good models that people can follow, especially for their own website, and how it needs to be prominent, needs to be easily accessible, easy to find. You know, and I get a little bit frustrated because I come from an independent boutique hotel background, and that I have a lot of friends who have said, oh, well, I'm staying at this big brand or that big brand because they have that promise and they, you know, they're going to do it. And I'm kind of like, but, you know, the smaller independent boutique hotels have been providing that experience all along, right? And it's been in the background. And granted, they had to step it up a notch with the way that this pandemic has hit. But I mean, they're the ones who have been known for paying attention to detail. And so I think we need to do the same as all hotels for that attention to detail with our content, and you know, making sure that it's communicated. So, you know, a lot of what we do at Dragonfly, and you lead this department for us, is audits. We audit systems, you know, constantly. It's one of our biggest sellers at Dragonfly. So, you know, if you were to go in right now, if someone came and said, hey, I want you to do an audit, what are the top 3 things that you think someone should really pay attention to right now?
I would say the most important thing right now to take a look at is interface health. I think it's something that typically ends up getting ignored, and people, especially at the front desk, just become complacent with issues with reservations delivery or even ARI delivery up to a CRS. And, you know, if it's not something that you're familiar with, take the time right now to talk to your PMS provider or vendor or call support to walk through what you can do to audit those and figure out, you know, are my reservations being delivered? Am I getting errors? Am I getting like the fix me codes because my source codes aren't matching up, or my market segmentations? So I think looking at the interface health is really important right now. And then just general audit of your rates. Deactivate old rates. Again, there's a lot of rates that aren't necessary right now, like spa packages maybe, or dining or whatever that might be, but go ahead and deactivate, clean up your system. Sure that you have a lot of rates sitting in there that you haven't used in years already as it is. So clean those up, get them out of the system. And then then don't also forget about then your content too, right? So your textual and your imagery, and auditing those on all the systems should be something that you should be doing annually, if not more often anyways, but things have changed. There may be services that are no longer available or temporarily closed, like the fitness center, and communicating that and getting your content updated. So auditing your rates, auditing your content, and auditing your learning and auditing your interface health.
Great. Those are great tips, Erica. We have a couple questions from the audience. So it says, are you seeing any distribution companies taking this time to develop new technology? Is anyone introducing anything new right now?
I mean, I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier that some of the GDSs and the CRSs are, I don't know that they're so much developing new technology so much, but they are developing ways to communicate these new needs for guests, like the housekeeping items. But I off the top of my head, I haven't, I can't think of anything, but I do have my latest Hospitality Upgrade magazine that I got last week, and I haven't had a chance to read it. So maybe there's something in there, but I don't think that I've heard of anything. Have you?
Not really, other than, you know, them trying to partner differently with hotels, and you know, some of the programs they're putting together I think are beneficial, and some I wouldn't recommend, quite frankly, because it could get us into that let's go to the bottom rate game, and I don't think we need to do that. I mean, we don't have a price problem right now, we have a demand problem, and I think people need to remember that. And so, you know, the distribution is about, you know, are there additional distribution channels? I mean, like what we did in New York for one of our clients, where we found a distribution channel that was primarily for doctors and nurses, and the traveling doctors and nurses, and, you know, cities were paying for them to come in and do that. And now it's starting to happen in Phoenix and in, you know, Houston and different places where they're having to bring in the traveling nurses and doctors. So, you know, we partnered with Hotel Engine, I believe, for that. So, you know, I think that there isn't a ton of development going on because, unfortunately, a lot of people are on furlough right now too. So I'm not seeing a ton of that. Here's another question. With the rapid changes to travel and states restricting other states from visiting, quarantining for 14 days once arriving, what would be the best way to communicate this information? I know this is a hard one. Emails, websites, text message, social platforms, everything. I mean, it's hard to keep up. It changes every day. Like, what have you seen some best practices with that, Erica?
It does. It changes every day. It's the different markets. I mean, I'm here in Nashville. I'm kind of waiting any day now that we may go back to our phase 1 and go back to full lockdown, basically, because our cases are also, we're not as bad as some of those other states, Arizona and whatnot, but it's getting pretty bad. But, unfortunately, I think it's one of those things that it's up to the guest to do that research of, do I have to quarantine if I go from here to there or whenever I come home? Because it's so ever changing. And that, kind of goes back to why we need those flexible policies, because, somebody may have a trip planned and then the day before they're leaving, they find out they have to quarantine for 14 days when they get there or when they come home, and they're like, it's not worth that.
You can't do that. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. I mean, I think we can, you can communicate in all those channels. You can obviously, anyone who has a future arrival, you can have a schedule, an email of reaching out to them, to find out if they do need to make a change. And, I've seen some companies, Outrigger, Jenna was even talking about this last week on our Insights interview of how they're communicating to guests arriving the next 30 days. Unfortunately, Hawaii just extended it again. So now they have to communicate to all the guests arriving in August. And so, I think that there are some things that we can do to communicate to our guests, but it is ever changing. And, literally, I think one of the best things we can do is just encourage our guests to check the state's regulations and the cities and to see what's in place before they get on an airplane. Because, it could change overnight. And they could be leaving at, noon tomorrow, right? So that's what I'm thinking. Like, I'm supposed to come to Nashville to HDC in August, and now they're not sure if the in-person's going to be able to happen, and it could change the day before, right? So, I need to keep my eyes on that as well, to see if I'll have to quarantine when I get back for 14 days or something, right? So right now our cases in Colorado are growing a bit, but they're not crazy. So, and we don't have any quarantine in place here right now. So let's see. If I'm responsible for content and distribution and that wasn't my area of expertise, how do I get training? Call Erica.
Exactly.
How do I get training? And I think that's a super good question, because I do think what I've observed is that distribution has been put in the hands in many cases of revenue management, and some of them have no background in distribution. So how can someone get trained? I know they can hire you.
Yeah,
but...
yeah. I mean, outside of hiring me, is calling your provider, your CRS provider, primarily is going to be the one that's going to be distributing your content, and ask them how it's being done. Because, some CRSs are going to automatically, you update your GDS content in the system and it'll publish, and then others, it's a completely different process. So contacting them or using their help files is a really big one as well, to understand what and how information is being distributed. Then when it comes to your OTAs, again, pick up the phone and talk to your market manager if they're there, right? We keep kind of mentioning that there's a lot of these people that are unfortunately furloughed or even laid off, but they should be having some kind of other replacement person that can help walk you through how to make those updates. Your images may also be getting distributed much differently than just textual content. So also digging to find the answers from your account managers, or, make them your best friend to figure those types of things out.
Yeah, that's good. One more, let's see. In your opinion, with the current state of hotels now, how will rate structure change? Is having a best available rate best? Negotiated rates, marketing rates, essential employee discounts? I know that's what do you think, Erica? I mean, how do you think that's going to change? I know you are part of our team that manages a lot of hotels' revenue management services, right? So you're the distribution side of it, but you're on a lot of those calls. What are you seeing happening?
Well, I'm seeing hotels going back to negotiated accounts and renegotiating. Not necessarily for 2021 just yet, but at least for the remainder of 2020, to try to kind of get some business coming back, even though we all know it's mostly at this point leisure, and probably will be for a minute. But, you know, yeah, I mean, people are looking at rates, getting rid of some of those unnecessary packages that just don't seem to be a big hit anymore, spa packages and such. You know, making sure that you're working, if you have a AAA, get that out there, your AARP rates. I mean, there are people that are traveling and they want a discount if they can, obviously, make sure they're qualified for it. But I think too that the 2021 RFP season, which is usually kicking off about now, is going to be an interesting one of what that's going to look like. I think that, you know, that's something that I did want to bring up is it's really important for people to start understanding their PMS and or CRS and the flexibility, the options that you have for rate loading. Because I think that there's going to be a big mixture of flat and dynamic pricing going on. So understanding how that can be accomplished within your systems. You know, it may not be turned on, so you may not see that you have the ability to do it. For instance, in opera, that's something you have to turn on. But take the time now, again, while it's a little bit slower, to learn that type of stuff in the system so that when the time comes, you're ready to hit the ground running, to be able to load these dynamic and flat rates, to be more flexible for 2021 and beyond. But I mean, I think that, you know, having the essential worker rates is something you're seeing, but, you know, it was really big in New York the last few months, but not quite so much anymore, right? Because the nurses and doctors are going home or moving to the next location. So it can just depend on the market you're in. Yeah.
Another thing I would say, too, is non-refundable rates don't make any sense right now because nobody wants to book a non-refundable, non-changeable, non-this, that, everything else, because people need flexibility right now. Because right now, we just don't know what the day's going to hold. So I would not recommend any of that. I think you can have an advanced purchase rate, but you need to make it like fully refundable. So at that point, it makes sense, right? So, you know, I don't recommend that right now. And probably not, like you said, for a minute, will those be valuable anymore. And I think you bring up a really good point about negotiated rates, because, you know, being able to negotiate that rate, but yet have it, you know, have that as a ceiling and then float off your dynamic rate as things change is going to be, you know, I think an important part of what hotels need to deliver to corporations to get them traveling again. You know, I unfortunately have heard some big, huge companies who, other than essential client travel, where they, for example, have to go on site to audit the books or something like that, they've canceled everything until June 2021. So it's really sad, but it's a reality of where we are. And so it's going to be, you know, very interesting next 2 years. So what positive actions have you seen hotels take to further their distribution during this time? And on the flip side, what negative actions or lack of action have you seen hotels take?
So on the positive side, you know, hotels, I have seen that some hotels are actually cleaning and auditing their systems, which we've talked about several times already. Really important. So that's really great. And a lot are actually taking a look at their tech stack. Is the technology that we have today the right technology? Do we have too much technology? Do we need to pare it down? Do we have the right partners? So now it's a really great time to be doing that. And there are, and we'll talk a little bit more about this too, but there are companies that are changing systems right now. And then the other thing that's really good too is, you know, we talked about the content earlier, but don't forget about your RFP tools. You know, if you're using a Lanyon or a Nexus, for your RFP. Get ready for that. You know, it may be a little bit delayed this year, but it's going to pop up at some point. Have your information audited and ready to go. And also, FYI, there are still accounts coming through with RFPs. So, you know, if your salesperson is furloughed, or whoever might normally be handling that, make sure you're logging in and looking for those accounts, and probably going ahead and accepting them at this point. If they're sending you a bid, they probably have some trouble for you. So that's something that I think that I've seen is really positive that hotels are doing, is keeping an eye on those RFP tools. On the flip side, though, I think from a negative perspective is I think that a lot of hotels haven't done a really good job of communicating when they're opening. And I do realize that it keeps changing. But, you know, I've been on plenty of hotel websites and just keep jumping in the booking engine and just trying to find the first available date.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, when is it? Is it August 1st? Is it 2021? What is it? I think that that's something I've run across as not doing good. The hotels that aren't doing very good with. The other thing too is not updating like the specials and offers pages. Again, we've talked about, you've probably already discounted some of those rates, or not discounted, but removed some rates, the non-refundable spa packages. Well, make sure your website doesn't have those anymore, because people will try to book them and they're not available. They might want to try to book them anyway. So keeping that up to date with what you are offering, you know, just your simple bar, your AAA, maybe an essential worker rate, as we talked about earlier. And then meeting space is another one as well, that I think hotels are probably, I don't know if they're just intentionally not doing it, because the reality of meeting space with social distancing, right? You know, that meeting room that used to be for 200 can only take 75 now, or whatever that happens to be. But updating that information on your website so that it's clear that these are our new social distancing occupancies for these meeting spaces. And don't forget to also do that in your GDS as well, or any other, you know, meeting brokers or Delphi's, whatever systems you're using, so that the information is quickly available for when the sales departments do get those calls about these small meetings, that there's still some happening. There's not a lot, but there are a few happening. So updating that, I think hotels are just been a little trigger shy to put that information out there. But they should.
I agree with that. And I've even seen hotels go out with, even launch new websites and emails that show meeting rooms packed in their pictures. And I'm like, no, guys, you gotta get all new photography. I know it's expensive, but you know, I would rather have a less quality picture and show the real reality than to have a guest look and go, oh my gosh, are they letting them be on top of each other in their meeting room? So I think we've really got to think about all of that now. I've seen, you know, some really good photography out there of the new requirements. I mean, it seems so lonely at a meeting to be at a 6-foot table by yourself.
Right.
But I mean, I've seen some good photography out there that can encourage some of those small meetings to come back, because you can socially distance. You can do, instead of serving, you do the kind of the lunch boxes, right? And different things like that are intended to make it safer to actually have an in-person meeting. And I think it's important that we reflect that in our content, as you said, all over the place. So some hotels have considered this time ideal to migrate from one system to another. And I'd love to know what you think some of the pitfalls and challenges associated with migrations and new installations are. We do these all the time, and there are lots of pitfalls and lots of challenges. And I think it's especially challenging when you don't do it all the time, right? I mean, we at least have the experience to know when something's going sideways, or to know and to plan for, with our project plan, some things that might go wrong, and to prepare everyone that something will go wrong. And our intent is to mitigate that when it happens, right? Because you always have an issue or two or three, right? So, you know, what pitfalls and challenges have you seen? You've transferred migrated so many systems in your 20 plus years doing this. So what have you seen?
I have. You know, I think that people don't ask enough questions when they're doing it. I mean, like you said, we're familiar with it. We know what questions to ask. whether it's a system we've used before or not, we know what the expectations are, and ensuring that it gets loaded correctly. And I think that, you know, a lot of times we get brought into accounts and it's like nobody has a clue how they even got where they are today. And they're not optimized, or, you know, things aren't working correctly. And again, that sometimes front desk and revenue, whoever it is, just become complacent with, well, we get that error every day and we're just going to let it stay. You have to ask the questions, and be engaged and attend all the training. You've got to do all of those things. And, you know, it can take a while to make these transitions, right? Especially a PMS, right? That takes the heftiest of the hefty systems to change out, right? But so you need some time for that. But the CRS too can be time consuming, but make sure you take the time and to do it right, not to do it fast. And, you know, right now, as we already talked about, is a really great time to take a look at your tech stack and see if you've got what is appropriate for your property. But also keep in mind that it may just take a little bit longer right now in this COVID, post-COVID, whatever we're calling this world right now, is because people, again, are laid off or furloughed. So the resources are a little bit few and far between, and that's definitely causing a challenge with getting things done. But the flip side of that is not a lot of people are making these changes because the cost that may be involved, you know, or it wasn't planned, they don't have it in the budget, whatever that happens to be. So while there may be limited resources at the vendor side, those limited resources don't have the usual millions of projects going on at once. They have a third or a fifth of that right now. So it could work to your advantage that way. And hopefully the people that are still remaining are those ones that are seasoned, and will do a really great job to get that done. But, you know, when you are challenged with those things, again, you can always hire us to help you out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've walked into situations where literally, I think one of the concerns or pitfalls with this is if someone is actually deflagging and they're depending on the team from the branded hotel to then know Synexus, iHotelier, ResTrip, whatever they're going to from a central res system, to know that well enough to build it out, do all the connections, do all the testing, making sure everything's talking to each other. It typically is a disaster. I mean, we've walked into hotels where they had no outside bookings coming in from any distribution channel because the person that built it didn't even know they had to build anything, right? Didn't even know they had to like go to Sabre,
do something to connect it to GDS.
Expedia Live. Yeah, exactly. Or to GDS. Yeah. Exactly. Like, so, you know, I would say in those situations, hire our company or a company like ours, you know, because, you know, you can't expect that person who's worked in a brand environment, who's literally had a department of people at corporate to do this for them, to know this. So, you know, a company like ours can come alongside that person. We can teach them as we go. We can help them build it out, right? I've just seen companies, you know, try to do this, and it's rarely, in my opinion, been successful. And I think also that your point about asking the right questions on the upfront, they also, as they're in, they need to have an RFP. It doesn't need to have 3,000 questions, but you need to ask the most important questions. Like one of them, I saw a client recently make a huge mistake. They signed off on a new PMS and it didn't have a two-way interface with their CRS, and they never asked.
Wow.
And they're in a lot of pain right now because of it, right? So you know, come up with the 50 top questions, and there are resources out there we can help, you know, definitely, but there are companies out there that can help, or there are resources out there that can help you kind of delve into, you know, what are your business challenges? What systems do you use? What does it need to integrate with? All of those types of questions are so important, and you got to ask them before you sign on the dotted line, because it doesn't do any good after, right?
No.
So what, and you mentioned some of this a little bit earlier, but, you know, what should hotels be doing right now to prepare for 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we talked about extending rates. Like you said, we already kind of mentioned these already a little bit, but extending the rates, and a normal best practice in general when you're loading when you were loading your 2019 rates, for example, is to go ahead and load through the first quarter at a minimum of the following year so that you have time with those RFPs. Because while normally the RFP season is getting started in July, August, it goes till July or August the following year. I mean, it's kind of like never ending. It just may be a little bit busier sometimes than others. But extending those rates right now, go in there and, just match the 2019 rates for 2020. I'm sorry, what year is it? My goodness, 2020 rates.
Oh, I wish we could go back and start over.
Right? Let's go back to 2019. But extending your 2020 rates through 2021 with the same seasons, if you have seasonal rates, just get them out there because, as you mentioned, some companies have already announced we're not going to start traveling until June of 2021. Well, they may be ready to go ahead and get some stuff on the books, right? So go ahead and get the rates out there. And as I already mentioned too, a really big one is looking at what flexibility you have with rate loading and understanding how that looks, because there probably will be a lot more. We've seen it happening over the last few years, but I think now it's going to be really important to be able to have those ceiling rates. And then you have everything's dynamic and floating off of that, so that you're guaranteeing the client they're always going to be getting the best rate. So taking the time to learn that. I mean, learn as much as you can about your systems right now in general, because you aren't probably have that 40-hour, 40, 50, 60-hour week that you used to. So take that time and learn the capabilities of your system. And if it doesn't have what you need, then go look for a new system.
Yeah. And I know that some people aren't working those weeks, and other people, so many people have been furloughed that they're actually working longer weeks than they were before because they're doing 4 people's jobs, right? And they, there may be situations where they don't have someone who knows how to do any of this for them. And, again, companies like ours can help through this at a fraction of the price, to help you get to the other side of it. But it's really hard out there right now for a lot of people who are still working, also, as well as those, of course, who aren't.
Right. I mean, and that's it too. I can't remember what that game show was, but phone a friend. I mean, that's something that I do today too. I mean, when there's something
$1 million question or something.
Yeah, something. Yeah, it's like there's got to be a way to do this, and I just pick up the phone and call my trusted colleagues that have a lot of knowledge in the systems and say, I'm trying to do this. Is it possible? How do I do it? Call your friends, call your neighbors. I mean, maybe they're wondering the same thing, and it's when you can kind of figure it out together.
Yeah. And don't always trust support. I'm sorry, tech companies, but sometimes your support, we know your system better than support does. So, you're really good, Erica, about not taking no for an answer until, we've exhausted our resources and the answer is really no. We have encountered times over and over again with support saying one thing and the reality being another. So, you have to be tenacious in this world. Technology, all this integration and the fragmented systems we have in the hotel world causes a lot of challenges. And one of the biggest challenges that we deal with, whether it be migrations or ongoing with clients, is the pointing fingers at each other, and instead of the reality is Sabre is not going to know Opera as well as Opera should know, and they're not, neither one of them is going to for sure know how it all works together and how it's integrated, so it's really hard in that environment. There are some companies that do it better than others and that have documentation better than others. But the reality is that there's a lot of coordination that has to happen with the companies. And sometimes you have to drive that. You have to invite them all to a call together and say, we're going to resolve this together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Done that a few times. Yes, we have, haven't we? Let's see. So this is interesting. If you were still leading distribution for a hotel company like you did at Kimpton, what would your top 3 priorities be right now? We've pretty much kind of discussed a lot of these already, but interface health would be my number one. Looking at the systems and taking the time to get rid of those errors that you may have just been ignoring for years. Learning how that interface works and fixing those challenges. Number one, extending rates. Go ahead and get them extended through 2021, if not through March of 2022, and just get them out there. It'll save you some time later when hopefully you start getting really, 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 really busy and you don't have the time to extend the rates. So go ahead and get it done now. And then auditing your systems, clean them up. Especially, I know a lot of revenue and distribution people tend to be very anal. So clean your system, get rid of that stuff that's no longer necessary. Just hide it from your view. So those would be my three.
Good. Perfect. So what are the biggest mistakes you've seen hotels make with distribution?
Not understanding how the connections work. We've kind of, mentioned it a few times, and understanding how that interface between your PMS and CRS work, understanding how that the RMS is connecting to your CRS and your PMS. How is your RFP tool even connected, if it's connected at all? How are you connected to the GDSs? How do you get connected to the OTAs? How do you change your room type name on an OTA? I mean, there's so many things that come along with it that you have to, and you don't have to know all the intricacies and insides and out of it. I mean, I certainly don't know it all because I don't work at a CRS, so I don't actually know what that back end system is that they're connecting to the wholesalers with, but I understand it enough to know what information needs to be provided and when to make it successful. And the flip side of that too, of not understanding the connections, is especially when you don't know understand how the interfaces or connections work, test, sell. Anytime you do something, test it. Did I build this rate correctly? Is it returning correctly for a client on my booking engine? Can they see it in the GDS? If I updated a room description or a rate description, is it being reflected on my booking engine? Make sure that because maybe you forgot to hit the save button. I don't know. Maybe your internet's just kind of blipped on you and it didn't save. It's like you got to make sure that the updates that you make are visible by the client, because if not, then it was for nothing.
Right.
So those would be my two biggest mistakes. So not understanding the systems and not testing changes or new things.
Yep. So do you believe distribution positions are still valuable in the hospitality industry, or do you think revenue management should do it all?
No, you definitely need some distribution teams. They're just as important now as they were 10, 15 years ago. And the revenue guys, they have guys and gals, they have a lot on their plate already as it is, the reporting and all the analytics, and they, if they have an RMS, they've got another system kind of in the mix. But the distribution people tend to have a little bit more of that technology experience and understanding how everything works, to make sure that, when we get a new corporate account, that it gets loaded and distributed to the GDSs appropriately. Once the RFP season kind of kicks off, it's so important, especially now, to make sure that your negotiated or consortium rates are bookable, because business is slow as it is. So, but if your rate isn't there, then you're not going to get any, right? So, we've gone into multiple accounts that, they're like, our GDS is down. And it's like, that's because you didn't load any of your rates in the GDS. So your clients can't see them to book them. So, and then we what was it? We just recently did increasing GDS bookings by
45%.
45%.
Yeah, for one hotel, because they didn't have them out there. Yeah. And they didn't even realize.
And that's exactly. And that's something that, people can, if they don't understand the systems, they say, well, I told the CRS that it needed to be in the GDS, but you didn't know you had to take the extra step to actually get that completed, because maybe you worked at like you said, a brand that had huge departments of people who did this for you. There's so many revenue people I even meet that don't even know what a GDS is. So it's, you need to understand those things, and the distribution team is, we can implement those strategies that you want. We can figure out the way to manipulate the system or get creative in the system, where the revenue leader may not have the time because of all the owners meetings and the, everything else that they've got going on.
Yeah. Well, and I like the way our team is structured when we go into a revenue management situation, is we want our revenue leaders focused on strategy and, interpreting the analytics and what's going on in demand, and does our pricing strategy make sense? Where do we need to adjust price? Where do we need to, up or down? They need to be focused on that. And then someone else can load the rates, who knows how to do it, who knows how to connect everything. Someone else can change the content, who knows how to do it, who knows how to connect everything. So I think it's important to allow your revenue leader to be a revenue leader and have someone who can actually kind of do the tactical stuff on the back end for them, so that they can lead, especially if you're in a multi-prop environment. It's really hard, for a revenue leader to do all of that. And I know in some situations they have analysts on board at resorts and that type of thing. I get it. And, some of the resources that they can use in addition to their providers that provide help files and knowledge centers and that type of thing for them. HEDNA, Hotel Electronic Distribution Network Association, is a great group that focuses primarily on distribution. HSMAI has some good publications. Cindy Estes Green, Demystifying Distribution, I believe, was HSMAI publication that it seems like it's even more so than maybe revenue leaders used to be in a black box. Distribution people are in the back closet, like updating rates and connecting all this stuff together, and watching the message. I've done plenty of chain code certifications, watching messages fly back and forth, and figuring out on that little string, like, what's wrong, what's missing. And so people think, oh my gosh, that's so complicated, when in reality it's not. It's detailed. There are a lot of details. You got to be detail oriented for it, but it is something that is not mystical. It can be demystified. So I would encourage people to get that report from HSMAI, look at hedna.org and see what the resources are there. Have a mentor like Erica, and there are a few other really, really solid distribution people out there. Evelyn Oreskovich is really solid in this, and a number of other people that are out there that have been around for a while and who get it, right? And there's nothing wrong with asking for help and asking for someone to coach you and train you and help you, and we're all willing to do it. I have a distribution background as well, and we're all willing. We need to. We've got to get the next generation after that up to speed on all this, because one day you and I are going to retire and live on our lake, and
hopefully soon.
Bye-bye, Saber. I don't know. I've probably got 10 more years here. I don't know. But anyhow, it's something that I think is, as I said at the top, I feel like it's a lost art in our industry. And I think it's something that we really need to pay attention to, and that needs to have value. Is it behind the scenes a little bit more than revenue? Absolutely. But it is something that you will not be a successful revenue director if your systems are not healthy and your rates are not loaded, and all of those types of things. So I think it's super important. You won't be a successful director of sales and marketing if your rates aren't loaded, right? So it's very important to the success of all of our hotels to be sure that this is dialed in and that it's done right. And I do think that as things start to open up, that distribution is a key part of recovery. If your channels are shut down, or your room types aren't selling, you don't have availability or inventory out there, you don't have the right content, then you're not going to be in the right position to recover as well as someone who does. It's again, one of those departments that I think has been discounted recently. in my view. And that makes me sad because you and I both come from, have come up through the distribution side of things. And I think it's extraordinarily important. So Erica,
Yep.
is there, we've got just a couple of minutes left. I'm looking, I don't think we have any more questions. So if there's one piece of advice that you could give to people who may be furloughed or laid off right now, a piece of encouragement that you could give, what would you say?
Well, I mean, like you said just a minute ago, is, the success of the hotels distribution is going to be a big key part of that. And hopefully your hotel company or your hotel that you work for or were furloughed from will bring you back, because it is going to be critical. And the revenue leaders are going to be extra focused in on that revenue and having to reforecast more often. And so I think that it's encouraging that these departments will come back and hopefully sooner rather than later, because like you said, I mean, we need these people, and we need to mentor some more people, younger people, so that, in 20 years, when you're 10 years for you or 20 years for me, when we're not here, that somebody can, still handle those. But there are companies that are starting to bring people back, and so that's really good news. So hopefully you do get back to work really soon. And, and if your company isn't bringing you back, I think that the vendor companies are starting to bring people back. Maybe it's time for a change to go to the other side, right? To the vendor side versus the hotel side. And honestly, it's not a bad idea, because a lot of the vendor people, I've never been a hotelier, so it would be really nice to have some knowledgeable hoteliers on the other side.
Yeah. No, I agree. And we've been seeing contracts pick up as well, which is a good sign. I hope that the reemergence of this thing going crazy across the country is not going to impact that. But I think people are starting to kind of get out of the shock mode. Like, you go through this like complete and total shutdown at some point, going, what the hell is going on, right? And you can't take it all in, so kind of everything stopped for a while, right? And now people are starting to realize, what's important to them, what do they need to do to recover, what do they need to put in place. And so, we're certainly seeing that at Dragonfly as well, which is good. And so I agree with you about the tech company hotel side. I've been on both sides. So, I worked for Anasazi, I worked for TSR, Class International, so Travel Click. So I've been on both sides of the equation, and I think it's been invaluable experience to see it from both sides. And it's also built relationships on, both sides of the table that have been invaluable for us. And, so you don't have to just be at a hotel. There are a lot of companies that service hotels and restaurants that, could definitely use support, and will be bringing people back for sure. Yep. So I have a fun question from the audience, and this will be our last one, and this is a really fun question. Where will your next vacation be once everything is more settled? Either somewhere new or somewhere you miss visiting?
Oh, goodness. I've been having dreams about going back to where we had our honeymoon.
Oh.
So visiting somewhere I've been before. We had such a fantastic experience last December, and I've been tempted multiple times because they've had a few sales recently that I was going to just book it, because again, it was a 24-hour cancellation period, so I could cancel it at any point. But I haven't pulled the trigger. But yeah, it would. So that's in the Dominican and Punta Cana. So that's where I would go, is somewhere away from, really, really far away from reality.
Well, I would
either
go to Paris. I was born in Paris. Some of you know, and over the past few years, I've gone every 6 to 8 months, and I'm really sad that I haven't been for a bit. Mm-hmm. So probably Paris, and then I'd like to take, an add on to Lake Como, Italy, where Scott and I spent our anniversary year before last, and it is just the most magical place in the world. And so I would love to do Paris and Lake Como. And I can't wait to be able to do it, even though Americans are not wanted there right now and aren't permitted.
Right.
But I hope that we will be soon. And,
Yeah.
you know, I encourage all of you to think and dream about your next vacation, because all of us need it. And
well, you know,
so
and actually
said,
there was something
yes,
there was something I've been seeing earlier on during the crisis about, you know, when everything opened back up for Americans to travel to American cities. And I had multiple friends who know I work at hotels, and they're like, well, what can we do, you know, for your industry right now? And I was like, well, when you're comfortable and when the world opens up, travel. And I don't give a crap where you go. You don't have to stay in the United States. We have hotels all over the world, right? So
right.
Go to Europe, go to, you know, Mexico, go to wherever it is you want to go. Just get there. I don't care how you get there. If it's on a train or a car or a plane, just get there, go somewhere. And so,
travel.
you know, I think that, yeah, like you said, just dream and be ready for it. Now, when am I going to be ready for it? I don't know. I'll figure that out one day.
Yeah, I hear you. So with that said, we're coming to a close of the session. You know, if you guys would like to share it, our dragonflystr.com Insights page will have the recording up in the next couple of days. It'll be out on our YouTube channel. And, you know, we encourage you to share this with others. And hopefully it's been learning for you, educational for you, and enjoyable as well. Erica, thank you. I'm so glad you're part of our team here. Couldn't do it without you, and truly appreciate both you professionally and personally. And happy anniversary week again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carol.
Take care.